anti-trans pundit Matt Walsh tells a lie so big, even Joe Rogan called bullshit. Is this about the litter boxes, or is this something else that he's lying about?
Oh, this is something else. This is so much something else. In fact, this is something so bad. All right, now
just can we just, like, for the sake of my well-being, say that it wasn't bigger? There was nothing, because I don't know how much more I can take of the lies of Matt Walsh and the people that believe that.
Okay, so before you lose all hope, Emily, before you sink into the despair of a Matt Walsh story, let me put this into context. Matt Walsh was on the Joe Rogan Experience, and Matt was going on and talking about puberty blockers, which we've got an interesting story coming up at the end of the show that I hope that everybody will pay attention to and respond to in their own ways. But Matt Walsh said they have staked everything on this, meaning the prescription of puberty blockers and using those with youth. They've also staked their professional reputation, because that's the other problem, he quotes. Not only is it political incentive in the money, but if they admit that they're wrong, then they also admitting that they have horribly disfigured and abused thousands, maybe millions of kids. Joe Rogan responds and says, so how many people have had this done? And again, we're talking about puberty blockers, okay? Walsh comes back and says, well, it depends on what. I don't think we have exact numbers, but if we're talking about the drugs, it's, millions. So Rogan comes back and says, millions of kids have been on hormone blockers? Really? And that's the tone he uses with Matt Walsh.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Walsh says, hey, I'm sure someone's going to fact check me on it, but my guess is that we're into the millions now at this point. Yeah, that would be my guess. Now, the funny thing is, Matt Walsh says somebody's going to fact check me. Who fact checks Matt Walsh? Joe Rogan's producer in the booth. Pulls up the Google search right there on the air and breaks in to Joe and says, yeah, Joe, within the last 5 years, it's only been 4,780 children who've been put on puberty blockers.
And I would be very interested to hear how many of those kids put on puberty blockers were actually trans kids. What percentage? I'm sure it's the larger percentage, because I don't know the numbers on how prevalent precocious puberty is, where a child starts puberty way too early. Like we're talking about 6-year-olds and things like that, in predominantly in the case of females, but it is used widely for that. So I'm betting that the trans numbers are higher in that, but I'm curious, and I'm willing to bet that those numbers include both.
So I don't know what their source was. They did not provide that, but this is what happened after that number was shared live during the Joe Rogan Experience. Producer Jamie Vernon said, that's a very small number if it's right. Rogan read the Reuters article out loud and then quipped, that would be a big undercount. Producer Vernon says, that's less than 1,000 people a year. Walsh said, I would guess, hundreds of thousands at this, but I could be wrong. Rogan laughs and says, 1 million sounds great. But Walsh then continues, trying to recover and save as much face as possible. But part of the problem, though, is that it's very hard to get numbers on any of this stuff. And who are you going to trust when they're telling you the numbers? So that's one of the issues with all this stuff. Basically saying that the medical association that they depend upon so stringently to give them the details, to be able to say, this is how many people have been given gender affirming care, and this is how many people have detransitioned, and this is how many people. Then he turns around and says, but you can't trust these numbers.
You can't trust them. Yeah.
You can't trust them. So
Yeah, and that's the way it is, right? If you have something that confirms what you say, it's trustworthy. If you have something that contradicts what you say, you can't trust any of it. And I love that it's a blanket statement of like you just can't trust medical professionals, the process, and all of that. And it's just like, yeah, whatever.
yeah. And so confirmation bias, I mean, that is Matt Walsh's, it's tattooed on his right butt cheek. Hypocrisy and lies is on the left butt cheek. But, the thing is that there's a video around the internet. You can go find it. But somebody is now going to be going Matt Walsh, naked butt tattoos. But the reality is that, when we shared the numbers from the American Association of Plastic Surgeons, we documented and we said, look, this is who we read from. This is not from an article. This is not from, somebody's estimation. This is from the offices themselves that are required by the medical licensing associations and boards to submit accurate information and details. Now, if we want to basically under erode all of the medical association, then why in the hell are we even bothering to pay for hospitals?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing that's the one that I always go back to. Like they're trying to say you can't trust doctors. You can't trust doctors with this trans stuff. Like you can't trust them or whatever. But they have no problem trusting them with heart surgeries or brain surgeries on kids, which are, I mean, so much more critical and so much higher stakes. And yet the procedures, the documentation, the numbers, the medication, their process, everything is trusted. And it's just this one issue where like now all of a sudden, all doctors, all records of medication, all of this stuff is just false.
Yeah. And again, at the same time, this is the same group of people, the same political parties who are essentially saying we need to pump up the money making into the hospitals. We need to make sure we keep medication costs high. We need to make sure that we keep insurance in a place where patients are not getting a reasonable and economic healthcare system. These are the people who are saying, no, we do not want general healthcare provided for everyone. These are the individuals who are basically saying, we don't trust medicine, but by God, we're going to make as much money off of them as we can.
Yeah. Another thing that you said in the article, it's a bit tangential, but I kind of wanted to bring it up. I've sort of found something very similar to what you said. And now this is just in personal experience. I've started responding to our YouTube comments here and there. And the reason I'm doing that, I know that like attacks and things like that, it's not worth it. It's just trolling. But when people are bringing up points that we're hearing across the country, we're hearing these talking points brought up over and over again. When I see them in comments on our YouTube videos, I take that as an opportunity to contradict that and counter that with facts. And so I'll go in sometimes, and I did this last week. I started going in and looking up the studies and some of these things. And I, was bringing that up. And it was mainly in a topic that we'll dive deeper into later, which is the puberty blockers. And so I did this research and found all these facts from studies and things like that. And I started, putting it in there in my comments to make sure I'm not trying to completely to sway the person that's made the comment. I'm trying to make sure that other people that read the comment don't just see that and think that that's it and that's the be all end all. I'm trying to offer the counterpoint and back it up with the facts and link to the studies and those sorts of things. Yeah. And one of the people I was talking to in one of these that got particularly heated said, well, we can do the fact off and just basically, you give your facts, I give my facts, and we don't get anywhere, sort of a thing. So I'm just going to stop this here and just say, make sure to go and do your research. Watch Matt Walsh's documentary, What is a Woman, and read the stuff by Abigail Schreier. And I'm like, All right, my head hurts from how hard my eyes have rolled back because you're again, like you said, they're not quoting studies and facts. They're quoting opinions and things like that from pundits that just regurgitate all or create these fabrications and these falsehoods about the community. And so,
Yeah.
but I went through all of that to say that yes, I've seen that firsthand where you respond with facts and all of that, and then they respond with their same sources of rhetoric and falsehoods.
And many cases, they will not come back with a source. What they will tell you is go to this secondary or tertiary source
Mhm.
and listen for yourself. And it's like, no, I don't have to listen for myself. You brought this issue up. You need to produce your own fucking facts.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not millions of kids that are getting puberty
No.
blockers just because one guy who has nothing to do with the medical industry says so.